Okay, this video is designed to teach you the more advanced rules for apostrophe usage, and it's going to focus on when you have more than one word in the demonstration of possession. Sometimes you'll have a situation where you have a compound word, like in these father-in-law's gloves. And what you want to do in these compound words is you'll want to wait until the end of the compound word to indicate possession. You know these compound words from our study of hyphen usage, and so you'll just wait until the end of a word like editor-in-chief or father-in-law to indicate possession in a situation like that. And that is similar to when you have a situation of what we call joint possession. I will also refer to this as shared ownership. This would be if you think about something that you share, maybe with someone at home. You maybe share a bathroom with a family member, or a kitchen is typically shared by family members. Even something abstract here, like the idea shared between Roz and Denise. So if you look at how that's represented in these examples here, we wait until the end, just like with the father-in-law's gloves. We wait until the end of the names to indicate possession. That is, we take the name that occurs last in this law office between Taylor, Sanders, and Weissman. The name that comes last is the one that gets the apostrophe S. Denise, because her name came after Roz. Roz and Denise's idea is the way that you're going to represent that. If you think of maybe like the restaurant Dave and Buster's, because Dave got his name to go first, Buster gets the apostrophe S. So you might want to think of this as the Dave and Buster's rule. In something like the next situation, we still have joint ownership. You can tell because it's just one project. It's a singular project, like a singular restaurant shared between Dave and Buster, or a shared idea between Roz and Denise. But in this situation, you have the addition of this possessive pronoun. And with the addition of this possessive pronoun, remember these are words like my, or his, or our. When you have a situation like that, you are going to then need to represent possession on each of the names in the word group. So that changes the representation a little bit. It's going to be Chen's, Ramona's, and my project, because the my indicates the possession there. I'm going to then show possession on Ramona's and on Chen's. So to use another example, if I go back to maybe the illustration of Dave and Buster's restaurant, if Dave were to be saying that it's Buster's and my restaurant or place. Or in the case of you sharing something with a sibling, it's my sister's because you say it's my room. Sorry, that's pretty messy. Because you say it's my room, you then need to indicate ownership on the sister. Buster's needs to have the apostrophe S because the my indicates ownership also. It's just that possessive pronoun that changes that shared possession rule from the original representation. Rule number 6, though, is different because we're not anymore dealing with situations where we have shared ownership or joint possession. In this case, what I'm highlighting in the rule here is individual possession of similar items. And that might sound like really wordy, but if you look at the examples, it'll make a whole lot more sense, I think. This is when you have the same thing, like writings, but Baldwin, like James Baldwin, has his writing, and Ellison, that is Ralph Ellison, has his writing. These are two pretty notable writers from the early 20th century, but they didn't co-write things. They each wrote in the early 20th century. Just like the doctor would have a different fee from the dentist. So it's the doctor's and the dentist's fees. These aren't things that are jointly owned. These are individual ownership. So I'm going to write here individual or individually owned. I asked you to think about on that very first slide with rule number 5, a time where you might share something with someone at home. I'm going to guess that even if you share a bathroom with someone at home, there are things in that bathroom that you possess individually. You might have, let's see, it's Bethany and Brady's toothbrushes, because even though you might share a bathroom with another person, you probably don't share all items in that bathroom with your co-owners. So these are individually owned items. So they are Bethany's and Brady's toothbrushes. Just like if you share a kitchen with someone in your home, when you sit at the table, you have a chair, someone else has a chair, so those things are individually owned. A good clue about identifying whether something is shared or individually owned is by looking at this S at the end of what is owned. When you see the fees, the writings, even the toothbrushes are plural, then you know that those are individually, not co-owned. They are individually owned. So that's a kind of clue. Okay, rule number 7, I actually sometimes liken to that hyphen rule that we saw with the proper nouns and the proper adjectives, in that I don't know that it's really a different kind of rule. It is separated in your packet, of exercises as a separate rule, but I would like to suggest that this is a rule that if you just follow what you already know about apostrophe usage, you will do this one accurately. Here's what I mean. When we have had in the past singular things like a dollar, a week, we have represented these things with an apostrophe S. Just like the a bird. Remember the bird apostrophe S's nest. So the fact that this rule deals with things having to do with time or having to do with money doesn't really change the rule, right? We still represent singular things with an apostrophe S. And then when we get to matters of plurality, when we have more than one week, more than $1, just like when we had more than one girl, and we knew that because of the S on girls, we're going to put the apostrophe after the S. So it could be 4 weeks apostrophe vacation, $5 apostrophe worth, just like we had the plural girls apostrophe. So this doesn't really need to be anything that gets represented any differently than or thought of any differently than we have been practicing with earlier in the week. These matters of time and money, length of measuring time and money. We just want to look at whether this is something that is singular, in which case we use an apostrophe S, or whether it is something that is plural, in which case we use an S apostrophe. Anything that is 2 or more gets represented with an S apostrophe. Okay, finally, the only time that we are going to use an apostrophe S to indicate something that is plural, this is a kind of exception, is when we are going to use numbers, letters, even symbols, or words themselves to represent a plural number. And what I mean by that is, if I were to say that there are 5 S's, not S's, excuse me, 6's in my Social Security number, if I didn't use an apostrophe after 6's, it would look like this. That's not as clear maybe as using the apostrophe right here. It may not be as clear to write B and then an S. It might actually be a little bit misleading to write BS instead of writing B and then an apostrophe S, to say that I got a lot of B's on my report card. So using this apostrophe here may be a way to differentiate or make clear that I'm really talking about the letter B and not something else, or even this symbol, the numbers in my PIN. I think this is probably a rule that is most commonly utilized when we see in like a textbook where an editor is talking about a decade, like the 1950s, and will use the apostrophe before the S. It's not required that you do that. You actually could do the 1950s just by writing like that. What this rule then represents is the other optional rule, or the kind of style rule that we have the option to use but do not have to. So writing something like numbers without the apostrophe, or the B's without the apostrophe is acceptable, but using the apostrophe to indicate plurals in this case is acceptable also. It's kind of using the apostrophe to make plural for clarity.